In the late 1800s, families scattered through the Appalachian hills lived by simple rules: keep to the land, keep to yourselves, and never speak too loudly about the things you couldn't explain. One cabin, tucked deep in a hollow, broke that silence. Their son began to change. He whispered to walls that gave no echo. He set extra places at the table for guests no one could see. At night he pressed his forehead to the glass and said the yard was full of lanterns. When the neighbors heard knocking at their own doors, 3 slow and 2 quick, they started crossing the road to avoid the family altogether. What they didn't know was that the boy wasn't only hearing voices, he was following orders. And every order was a warning. Obey, or someone in the house would not survive the night. Where are you tuning in from tonight? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story. The hollow was quiet, a cabin pressed between ridges. A family lived there, ordinary enough, until their boy began to see things no one else could. At first it was pauses. He stopped while carrying wood, staring into the corn as if someone called his name. His mother told him to hurry. He lifted his hand and waved. He began using names. A woman drowned years ago, a man buried on the ridge. He said they walked the rows at dusk, watching the house. At supper, he set an extra plate. For her, he said. His father snapped, but the boy only whispered, "She's hungry." He smeared soot faces on the stove wall, eyes too large, no mouths. His mother scrubbed them away. The next day they reappeared. Neighbors saw him stand in the road, bowing as wagons passed. He muttered, "You don't want to know who's with me." Word spread. Nights were worse. He pressed his forehead to the glass. "Lanterns," he whispered. His father walked the yard with a real lamp. The boy kept pointing. "Right there." By the second week he spoke in rules. Boots must be lined up, curtains shut at dusk, lamps must burn until dawn. He said if he failed, they would come inside. His sister copied him, claiming she saw shadows too. The mother pulled her away, shaking. The boy watched the ladder until she vanished into the loft. "They know her name," he said. Storms came late in the month. Wind rattled the cabin. The boy crouched on the floor, eyes locked on the door. "They're at the steps," he whispered. Thunder cracked. "They don't make sound." At dawn he touched the latch before his father could. He leaned his ear to the wood, nodded once, and stepped aside. The yard lay empty, washed clean by rain. Still, he whispered, "They will return." The figures followed him inside. It began with pauses in the middle of the room. He would turn his head toward an empty corner and listen. His lips moved, answering someone no one else could hear. When his mother asked who he was talking to, he said, "The man by the stove," and went quiet again. Then came the pointing. He sat at the table without eating, finger lifted toward the seam where 2 walls met. "He's standing there," he whispered. His sister started to cry. His father told him to stop. He didn't. Nights grew thin. He left his bed and walked the floorboards, stopping in doorways as if checking lines of sight. He whispered fast, then laughed once without smiling, then argued under his breath. When his father carried him back to the pallet, he rose minutes later and returned to the same spot, eyes on the dark. He started naming what he saw: a scar from ear to chin, a missing tooth, a dress that trailed water across the boards though the floor was dry. He described a woman with clouded eyes who tilted her head to listen. His mother told him not to say such things in front of the little one. He answered, "She already knows, rule." Is multiplied. The lamp must burn until dawn. Curtains must close before the sun dropped behind the ridge. No one would say the word sleep out loud. If a cup was set on the table, it belonged on the far left corner and nowhere else. He watched for mistakes and corrected them with shaking hands. He began to cover mirrors. He draped a blanket over the glass by the washstand and tucked the edges tight. When his mother pulled it off in the morning, he covered it again by noon. "They like faces," he said. "Don't give them any." He made small markers, 3 pebbles on a sill, a button under a table leg, a splinter across the threshold. When the father scuffed one by accident, the boy gagged and ran outside to retch, then returned pale and reset it with care. "They like lines," he said. "We need lines." He touched the doors as if they listened. He laid his palm flat against the wood and lowered his head. When asked what he was doing, he said, "Telling them we're still here." He would not say who "them" was. He refused food for the first time. Bread made them come close. Meat made them lean. He took water in small sips, staring at the corners between each one. The mother begged him. He held the cup and let it cool in his hands. He spoke to the corners in the second person. "Leave her alone," he said, standing between his sister and the pantry. "Take me if you have to." His sister hid under the quilt. His mother stood behind him with both hands raised, not touching him, not touching anything. When the father raised his voice, the boy went blank. His eyes slid past faces to a point just over a shoulder, as if a taller person stood there. He nodded once to the air. "All right," he said softly. "I'll do it." He began to set a plate on the floor at dusk. Water. A crust. A slice of apple gone brown. "So they won't be hungry," he said. The father swept crumbs aside with the back of his hand. The boy did not scream. He stood very still and asked, "Do you want them hungry in the corners or in the middle?" The crumbs stayed where they fell. He stopped blinking for long stretches. His eyes watered and burned. The mother cupped his face and dragged her thumb across his lashes to close them once. He jerked back, breathing fast. "Don't," he said. "They get closer when I blink." He guarded the little one. He made her sit on the bench against the wall he called safe. He would not let her run the length of the room or skip the way she had before. When she forgot and her heels scuffed the floor, he grabbed her wrist, not hard but sudden, and whispered, "Please don't." Then he touched the scuff with 2 fingers, like he was taking it into himself. He tied string, 1 loop from the latch to a chair leg so the chair would move if the door did. 1 line low across the hearth to catch a foot that should not be stepping. The mother cut a loop from the girl's wrist while she slept. The boy gathered the cut ends in his hands and closed his eyes like a man praying. He put hair in the crack above the door, loose strands from the brush, a ribbon's ends, a curl from the mother's shoulder. "So if they need something, they'll take that," he said. "Not the whole person." The mother reached up as if to remove it, then lowered her hand and walked away. He hummed when the house grew too quiet. Not a song. A low, steady sound that matched the rhythm of his finger tracing the baseboard. The lamp seemed to waver with it. The girl covered her ears. The father paced the narrow slice of floor the boy left clear, wearing a track into the boards. He banned words. Sleep. Safe. Gone. If someone slipped and said one, he went stiff, then whispered through his teeth, "Don't name what you can't keep." He told his father to move the nails from the door frame. "They catch on iron," he said. The father pried 2 nails and tossed them into the yard. The boy watched the places they had been and relaxed a fraction. "Thank you." He stood at the window at night and kept his forehead on the glass. The pain fogged and cleared with each breath. "They stand where the yard goes dark," he said. No one went to the window to look. When storms rolled across the ridge, he did not flinch at thunder. He flinched at silence between strikes. He said silence meant they were listening. He sat on the floor with his knees to his chest and stared at the door. He did not blink. He began to count under his breath. 1, 2, 3, and then stopped, started again, and stopped, as if counting required permission. He tapped the table. Tap, tap, pause, until the father caught his fingers to make it stop. The boy eyed his trapped hand and whispered, "You broke it. I have to start over." That night, the first knock came. Soft. 3 slow taps against the door, spaced as evenly as breaths. The family froze. The father stood with the lamp in his hand. The mother held the little one to her chest. The boy did not move. A long pause, then 2 fast knocks, then the 3 slow again, The father lifted the latch and found nothing but their own yard, the fence, the dark where the road turned. No tracks in the dust, no wind. He shut the door and slid the bar. The boy spoke from the floor without lifting his head. "They're sending a measure," he said. "We have to answer or they'll take their own." "How?" the father asked, voice low. The boy looked at the empty air above the hearth and nodded once, as if hearing a reply. "They want the room turned," he said. "All of it, around the fire." He placed his hand on the table and waited. His fingers trembled. "Tonight," he said. "We have to make the circle." The knocking changed. It learned his name. He woke the family at midnight, standing at the foot of their bed, dripping with sweat. "They spoke to me," he whispered. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He pointed at his sister curled under her quilt. "If I don't listen, she won't wake." His mother pulled the girl close. His father swore and told him to lay it down. The boy only shook his head. "They're in the walls. They're waiting." The rules multiplied. The lamp had to burn until dawn. The curtains must never be drawn after sundown. Cups belonged only at the table's far left corner. Shoes had to be lined heel to heel at the door. If anyone broke a rule, the boy stiffened, his voice thin. "You'll let them in." He made markers. A button under a chair leg. 3 pebbles on the windowsill, a splinter across the threshold. When the father kicked one aside, the boy gagged and ran to the yard. He came back pale, set the splinter again, and whispered, "They like lines. We need lines." He began to punish himself for mistakes. If his hand brushed a marker out of place, he held his breath until he nearly fainted. If he missed a count, he stood in the corner on one leg until his calf trembled. Once his mother caught him pressing his fingertips against the stove lid while it was still warm. His palm blistered. He hid it under his shirt. "They said I broke a line," he muttered. "I had to pay." The first command came on a windless night. The boy stood in the doorway of his sister's room, his body stiff, his lips moving without sound. Then he turned and began dragging things across the floor, cups, plates, the Bible, a chair. "They want space," he said. His father caught him by the shoulders. "You'll stop this madness." The boy's eyes slid past him to the air over his shoulder. He nodded once. "They told me you'd say that." Then his voice deepened, flat and cold. "If I disobey, she stops breathing." The mother gasped, clutching her daughter tight. The boy carried on, moving objects with frantic precision. He stacked, shifted, arranged until the room looked wrong, like furniture had been pulled into orbit around an unseen weight. Finally, he set the Bible face down in the center of the floor. He crouched over it, trembling. "It's done," he whispered. No one slept. The father sat with his fists clenched. The mother rocked the little one. The boy traced invisible lines with his finger in the dust, humming a low sound that never broke. When dawn came, he looked up with eyes red from no blinking. "They're pleased," he said. Then he collapsed onto the boards, as if the night itself had held him upright. They began at dusk when the light went flat and the trees turned into cutouts. The boy put his palm on the table, then on the back of his father's chair, then on the bench. "Turn it," he said. "All of it. Around the fire." His father stared. "No. They'll burn us out if we don't." The mother pulled the little one close. "Don't say that in front of her. She's the one they said would burn first," the boy answered, not cruel, just certain. He dragged the table anyway. The legs squealed across the boards. He shoved the chairs next, then the bench. He set a jagged ring of furniture around the hearth, too tight, off-center, wrong. He worked fast, thin arms shaking, breath short. When his father caught him by the shoulders, the boy's body went hard as a post. His eyes slid past faces to the air over a shoulder. "They said you'd try," he murmured. "If you stop me, it counts as yes." "Yes to what?" the father snapped. "They don't say that part." He moved the mother's rocker last. The seat thumped into place. Back legs on a crack, he called a line. He set a plate in the center of the floor and turned it upside down. The Bible laid face down on top of it, then stepped away and kept his hands at his sides like a man finished with a job he didn't want. The room felt smaller. The path from door to bed kinked around chair legs and table corners. Shadows stacked in places they hadn't stacked before. "Now what?" the father said. "We wait," the boy said. He did not sit. He stood in the bare space he'd left near the hearth and stared at the door. His lips moved, no sound at first, then a thin hum, flat and steady, like a wire in wind. He rocked on his heels without noticing he rocked. His eyes did not blink. "The little O," he cried softly. The mother tried to hush her. The father took one step forward and the boy's hum cut off like a snuffed wick. "If I stop," the boy said, voice clear and wrong in the quiet, "you die." "Who told you that?" the father asked, softer now. "They did." He started humming again. The lamp sputtered. The flame shrank, licked glass, steadied. The mother reached to trim the wick. The boy shook his head once. "Don't touch the light while I'm counting." "You're not counting," the father said. "I am," the boy answered. "But the numbers aren't for us." Minutes stretched. The hum filled them. Outside, a branch scratched the roof. The little one flinched. The boy didn't. He watched the latch. When a draft slid under the door, he lifted his hand and held it in the air, palm out, like stopping a mule. The draft passed. He lowered his hand. "How long?" the mother asked. "Until they say enough." "When will that be?" He didn't look away from the latch. "Before morning, if we did it right." The father couldn't hold still. He stepped into the circle. The boy's hum broke again. He stared at the father's boot heel touching a line. "Back," the boy whispered. The father stayed. "What happens if I don't?" They changed their minds. "About what?" "Who burns first?" The father moved back without meaning to. The boy began humming, thin and steady, a thread that tugged the room tight. Time thinned. The lamp ran low. The mother closed her eyes and rocked without a chair. The little one slept, mouth open, a smear of soot across her hairline where the boy had marked her earlier and the mother hadn't scrubbed hard enough. Near midnight, the knocking returned. 3 slow, 2 quick, 3 slow. The boy didn't answer with his knuckles. He hummed through it, a fraction louder, as if laying his sound over theirs. The pattern stuttered once, as if listening, then fell quiet. He stopped humming, nang at last. He whispered one word, "Enough." No one moved. He walked to the door and placed his fingertip on the latch, not lifting it, just touching. He nodded once, the way he had at dawn when the storm passed. "They're pleased," he said. Same words as before, softer, more tired. The father exhaled a breath he'd been holding so long it shook. "You see," he said to the mother, almost a laugh, almost angry. "Nothing happened." The boy kept his finger on the latch. "Something happened," he said. "It just didn't happen here." He took his hand away like a man removing a coin from a scale. He turned to the ring of furniture and set his palm on the nearest chair back. "Don't move it," he said. "For how long?" the mother asked. "Until they ask again." "When will that be?" He looked at the window where dawn had not yet begun. "Soon." They did not sleep. They lay down because bodies must. The father on the floor by the door. The mother on the boards with the little one on her arm. The boy sat where he had stood, eyes open, watching the door through the gap between 2 crooked chair legs. At gray light, the room looked worse. The circle of furniture was uglier honest. Ash from the hearth had tracked under their feet into a thin, accidental ring that made the planned circle look practiced. The father lifted a chair an inch. The boy said, without turning, "Don't." "It's morning," the father said. "They don't know morning," the boy answered. "They know lines." He went to the hearth and pinched a bit of cold ash and pressed it into a crack, where his shoe had scuffed the night before. He pressed until his fingertip went black. He did the same along the baseboard where the chair shadow fell, as if shadows could smudge rules. "You can't keep this up," the father said. The boy didn't argue. He nodded once, still pressing ash into the seam. "I know." "Then stop." He lifted his head at last, eyes red from not blinking. "If I stop, they start." He wiped his fingertip on his shirt and left a gray smear over his heart. "Today," he said, as if reading orders, "I have to mark the house." "Mark it how?" the mother asked. He looked at the cold ash in his hand. "Lines," he said, "so the fire won't forget where to stop." By the next week, the hollow was whispering about the boy. His family rarely left the cabin, but the neighbors began to see him standing in places no child should stand. He waited at the bend in the road, barefoot in the dust, both arms raised like a warning. A farmer came down with a loaded wagon and shouted for him to move. The mule balked, stamping. The boy shook his head, whispering, "Not yet." A moment later, a heavy branch cracked from the oak and slammed across the path. If the mule had gone on, the wagon would have crushed beneath it. The farmer drove home pale, telling anyone who would listen that the boy saved his life. But the way he said it carried fear, not thanks. Mrs. Miller found him outside her fence, staring into her kitchen window. "What are you looking at?" she demanded. The boy answered softly, "There's a woman in your kitchen who isn't yours." She slammed the shutters, and later that evening her bread collapsed in the oven. She told her sister the child had cursed her. He marked thresholds, pebbles on a porch step, a thin splinter across a doorway, a smear of ash on a windowsill. Some families swept the marks away angrily, only to find them back by morning. Others left them untouched, afraid to test what happened if they disturbed them. At the schoolhouse, he pressed his palm flat against the door and whispered. The teacher pulled him away, but the children swore the room went cold. For weeks after, none of them would sit near the door. The deacon came with a Bible and a hard voice. He prayed on the porch, naming all that should be cast away. From inside, the boy whispered through the door, "Don't say gone. They don't like that word." The deacon faltered mid-prayer. He left white-faced, telling others the family had invited something unholy into their home. The neighbors grew distant. Fewer stopped to trade, eggs spoiled on tables before they were carried to the cabin. The family's names were spoken in low tones on porches, then not at all. But the boy moved as if none of it mattered. He paused in shadows, tipped his head toward corners, muttered replies to voices no one else heard. He told one man not to let his dog off the rope, another not to use his son's name that night. When accidents followed, ignored warnings, broken buckets, spoiled food, a child's nightmare so real he woke screaming, people began to obey without admitting it. Knocks spread, not just on the family's door but at neighbors' windows, steady and deliberate. No one opened. No tracks in the dirt come morning, no reason on the wind, just the sound and the memory of the boy standing pale in the road the next day, his head tilted, listening. By month's end, no one came to borrow flour or share milk. Doors latched earlier. Children were kept inside after dusk. The cabin sat alone, lamp burning through the night. The boy whispered. The family trembled, and the neighbors prayed behind shut doors. Still, the knocks continued. The first sacrifice came quietly. At dawn, the mother found him crouched in the yard. A chicken lay still at his feet, its neck bent, its wings twitching against the dirt. His hands were red. He didn't look frightened, just drained, as though the night had wrung him dry. "They said it would take her instead," he whispered, nodding toward the cabin where his sister still slept. "I had to choose." The mother wept into her apron. The boy stared at his palms, sticky with blood. "It wasn't me," he said. "They told me what to do." They buried the bird at the edge of the cornfield. The father muttered about sickness, bad seed, anything but what his son claimed. But that night, the boy refused to lie down. He paced the floor, whispering to the corners. When the father barked at him to stop, the boy turned, eyes wild. "If I don't listen, more will die." Days later, the goat was gone. They found it behind the shed, throat torn, body stiff. No dogs prowled the hollow that week, no wolves. The boy only said, "It wasn't supposed to be her." Then the hound began to whimper whenever the boy came near. He tied himself to the porch post, trembling. One morning, only the rope remained, frayed, strands damp with saliva. The father swore he'd slipped it. The mother stared at the rope and said nothing. The boy sat by the hearth that night, rocking. "They're hungrier now," he murmured. He began setting food in corners, crumbs, water, bits of apple. "To keep them busy," he explained. When the father scattered the crumbs, the boy shrieked, fell to his knees and clawed the floorboards until his nails split. "You'll bring them here!" He collapsed, shaking, foam on his lips. The mother cradled him until he stilled. When he woke, he whispered, "It didn't help. They want more." The little girl dreamed of the hound. She said it stood at her bed, eyes hollow, jaw open. The boy nodded as if confirming her nightmare. "Not a dream," he said. They borrowed him. The mother pressed her hands over her daughter's ears and rocked her until morning. The boy didn't lie down once. By week's end, the barn stank. The father searched it, finding nothing. The boy refused to step inside. He stood at the door and stared into the rafters. "They sleep there now," he said. That night, the barn caught fire. Flames tore through the dry wood before anyone could carry water. The father fought with buckets. The mother screamed. The boy stood still, watching, his face unreadable. "They wanted light," he whispered. By sunrise, the barn was ash. The morning after the barn fire, the mother woke to find his pallet empty. The latch on the door hung loose, pressed open from the inside. His bisas, oots, were gone. She followed small prints through the damp dirt to the creek. The father trailed behind, spade still in his hand. The boy stood waist-deep in the river, arms raised, eyes fixed on the current. His shirt clung to his body, his lips blue. He whispered steadily, "Hold, hold, hold." "Out!" the father shouted. The boy shook his head. "If I leave, it takes the house." The mother waded in up to her knees before the cold drove her back. The father plunged farther, seizing him under the arms. The boy stiffened, back arched, eyes rolled white. "Don't break it," he shrieked. "If you break the line, we drown." It took both parents to drag him out. He collapsed on the bank, trembling, whispering, "It has hands." They stripped his wet clothes and set him by the stove. His skin burned with fever even as his fingers stayed cold. "Why must you obey?" the mother asked. "They trade," he murmured. "If I stand in the water, the house stands another night." That evening, he traced a ring of ash along the baseboards. He pressed hard where boards met. "Now the water knows where to stop," he said. The neighbors saw him by the creek again the next day. He crouched at the bank, laying stones edge to edge in a crooked line between two roots. When asked what he was building, he answered, "An edge. If I give them one, they won't make their own." By dusk, a man fording the stream swore he heard a child's voice say, "Stop." He reined in his mule. A fence rail shot past in the current, striking where the animal's legs had been. The man told the story in town that night. They said the boy was saving lives. They said he was bargaining with something no one else could see. At dawn, the boy touched the ash line in the cabin with 2 fingers. "It's still waiting," he said. And then he sat by the window, eyes open, watching the door through the pale light. After the river, he stopped asking for rope or water. He asked for ash. He went to the heap where the barn had burned, dug with his hands until his fingers were gray, and carried a pan of powder inside like treasure. He knelt at the door, pinching ash between his fingers. He drew a line across the threshold, then another, then a third. "If I give them marks, they won't make their own," he said. He worked the baseboards next, tracing a thin band around the cabin walls. Where furniture touched, he shoved it aside to finish the circle. At the seam where the lines met, he pressed harder, grinding black into the wood. "Here it stops," he whispered. By noon, the house smelled of cold soot. The girl coughed, rubbing her eyes. "It gets in my mouth." "That means it's working," he said. He marked the family. A smudge on his mother's throat, another on the father's wrists, one across his sister's forehead. "Don't wipe it off," he warned. "If you rub it, it breaks." The mother caught his hand. "You're not drawing on us like boards," she said. He pulled back gently. "They don't understand faces. They understand lines." He smeared a bar on his own skin across the back of his hand. "This one says wait." That night he set crumbs and water in the corners. It keeps them busy. The father knocked one bowl over. The boy whispered, shaking, "Do you want them hungry in the corners or in the middle?" The crumbs stayed. By morning, ash lay on everything: tables, chairs, the girl's quilt. The father said the house looked like a graveyard. The boy crouched at the door, pressing his fingertip into the bar above the latch, leaving a dark spot where ash would not hold. "They like iron," he said softly. "It keeps them still." The father swore. The mother looked away. The boy only smiled faintly, eyes rimmed red, as if the cabin had been remade into a map only he could read. The knocks returned before midnight. 3 slow, 2 quick. 3 slow again. The family froze. The father gripped the lamp. The mother clutched the girl to her chest. The boy sat by this door, eyes half closed, listening. "They're measuring," he whispered. "If we don't answer, they'll take their own." "Answer how?" the father asked. The boy pressed his fingertip into the ash line along the sill. With marks, he redrew the threshold, tracing each stroke until his finger bled. He smeared the blood into the bar above the latch. "Iron," he said. "They like it." The knocks faded. The boy rocked back and forth, humming low. "It's enough for tonight." Word spread the next day. Mrs. Mather swore she heard knocking at her window too. When she leaned out, the yard was empty, but her breath clouded like winter, though the air was warm. Others claimed they heard tapping at their doors. No fox, no branch. No one opened. No one found tracks. But the boy stood in the road that morning, head tilted, as if listening for an echo. Neighbors began crossing the road to avoid him. They latched their shutters earlier. No one sent their children past the cabin after dusk. Inside, the boy tightened the rules. Curtains shut before the sun dropped, cups left only in corners. No one to speak certain words. Safe, sleep, gone. He watched with sharp eyes. When someone forgot, he flinched, whispered apologies to the air, and pressed his palms into the ash until they turned black. The girl asked why. He answered calmly, "Because they're counting." "Counting what?" she asked. He looked at her as if the question itself was dangerous. "Breaths." That night, the knocks came again, faster this time. 3, 2, 3, 2. The boy didn't move to open the door. He sat cross-legged, palms flat on the floorboards, humming until the sound filled the room. The knocks stopped. The lamp flickered. The boy opened his eyes. "They're close," he said. "Closer than before." No one slept. By now, the boy's body was wearing down. He spent whole nights in corners, whispering to the walls, his fingers blackened from tracing ash. When his mother pulled him away, he shook violently, lips still moving, eyes rolled white as if he were still in conversation, and with something no one else could see. He punished himself for mistakes. If he smudged a line, he held his breath until he collapsed. If he lost count, he balanced on one leg until he toppled. One night, his mother caught him driving a sewing needle into his arm, tiny red beads rising in a neat row. "They want marks that don't wash away," he muttered. His father wrenched the needle from him. The boy didn't fight. He only whispered, "It wasn't me. They told me to." He hardly blinked anymore. His eyes stayed open until they streamed tears. When his mother tried to force his lids closed, he recoiled, gasping, "Don't. They move closer when I blink. Sleep came in seconds and vanished just as fast. He jerked awake, clutching the boards, whispering. They almost stepped in. His sister cried quietly under her quilt, too afraid to ask what he meant. His father muttered about fetching a doctor. His mother shook her head. No one would come. That night, his voice split. He spoke in two tones at once, one high, one low, arguing with himself. Then he froze, eyes wide. She owes them a breath, he said, pointing toward his sister. His mother pulled the girl into her lap and rocked her. His father slammed the table with his fist. The boy didn't flinch. He pressed his bloody fingertip into the ash line above the door. Not tonight, he said. At dawn, they found him collapsed in the yard. His body jerked, foam at his lips. His father lifted him, terrified. For a moment, the boy didn't breathe. His mother screamed. Then his chest rose again. His eyes opened, glassy and unfocused. If I stop, he whispered. They start. He stared up at the sky, a faint smile on his ash-streaked face. It worked. For now. The family could no longer hide what was happening. By now the neighbors had heard too many stories, the boy whispering to shadows, animals gone missing, ash lines smeared across the CO. Aubin walls. Some claimed he was cursed. Others swore he was keeping worse things at bay. Fear and gossip knotted together until the men on the ridge decided to act. One evening, 3 of them came to the cabin. They carried lanterns, Bibles, and the kind of voices men use when they want to sound certain. The deacon led them, jaw clenched, scripture ready. The boy stood in the doorway before they even knocked. His hand rested on the latch, his body still. He looked at the men's lanterns and whispered, "They don't like fire carried past the line." The deacon stepped forward anyway. "You've let something inside this house. We'll pray it out." The boy's eyes slid to the empty yard behind them. He nodded once, as if answering someone else. Then he said, "If you speak their names, they'll answer. If you call them gone, they'll prove you wrong." One of the men shifted nervously. "He's mocking," the deacon snapped. He raised the Bible, voice rising, but the words snagged in his throat. The boy's whisper cut across him, steady and cold. "They're standing behind you." All 3 men turned, lanterns swinging over empty grass. The silence afterward was heavy. The father stepped onto the porch, blocking their view of his son. "That's enough," he said. "We don't need your help." His face was pale, but his voice was iron. The deacon tried again, but his prayer shook. One of the others pulled at his sleeve, muttering that it was too late, that the boy was already claimed. Their lanterns wavered. In the end, none of them crossed the threshold. They left with their words half-spoken, boots crunching fast on the gravel path. Inside, the mother wept softly. The little girl clung to her arm. The father barred the door. The boy sat back down at the baseboard, pressing ash into the seams with his bleeding fingertip. He whispered, "They didn't like that. They're louder now." And through the thin boards of the cabin, the family began to hear it too. Soft knocks, not at the door this time, but along the walls, moving slowly, circling. The boy smiled faintly, as though the sound was proof. "They're closer," he said. The knocking no longer stayed at the door. It began on the north wall, 3 slow raps. Then the west wall, 2 quick. Then the east, back to 3. The sound moved like footsteps circling the cabin, patient and deliberate. The mother clutched the girl against her chest. The father gripped the poker from the hearth, eyes darting from wall to wall. "It's boards shifting," he muttered, but the words carried no weight. The boy sat on the floor, cross-legged, palms flat. His eyes were half closed. "They're walking the circle," he whispered, "counting where the lines are thin." The father shouted at him to stop. The boy didn't move. He hummed instead, low, steady, a vibration that threaded with the knocks. The sound grew louder, sometimes above their heads, in the rafters, sometimes beneath the floor, like fists striking from under the earth. The little one buried her face in her mother's skirt. The father slammed the poker against the wall. "Show yourself!" he roared. Silence followed. For a moment it seemed over, then the boy whispered, "You shouldn't have said that." The knocks resumed, faster this time, urgent. The walls quivered with them, as if the whole cabin were hollow and being tapped from the inside. The lamp guttered. Ash lines shifted under the draft. The boy scrambled on his hands and knees, smearing fresh ash across the floorboards. "Don't breathe on it," he hissed. "It listens to breath." His mother grabbed his shoulders. "Stop this! You're frightening her." The boy jerked away, eyes wide. "It's not me. If I stop, they'll come through." The little one whimpered. "Where?" The boy's gaze lifted to the rafters. His mouth opened, but the sound that came out was not a child's voice. It was lower, rough, like wood dragged across stone. "Everywhere," it said. The mother screamed, pulling both children close. Though one was no longer hers to hold, the father drove the poker into the floor until the boards splintered, shouting words he could barely string together. The knocking stopped all at once. The silence pressed heavier than the noise. The boy slumped forward, eyes glassy. His lips trembled with a faint smile. "They like this house," he whispered. "It's almost theirs." The silence didn't last. By the next night, the boy began to move without warning. Sudden jerks, as if pulled by strings no one else could see. He walked to the hearth and lifted a burning stick. His mother gasped, reaching for him. "Put it down!" The boy's voice came flat. "They said fire at the wall." The father tore the brand from his hands and stamped it out. The boy didn't resist. He only stared at the black mark left on the floor. "Now they'll want more," he whispered. He began carrying out other instructions, setting knives in strange places, on the sill, under the bed, balanced across the door latch. When asked why, he answered calmly, "So they won't cut her." He poured water along the window frame, tracing it with his finger. They said water keeps her inside. The girl cried, begging him to stop. He laid his hand on her hair. "I'm keeping them busy," he said. The mother tried locking him in the loft. At midnight, they woke to the sound of boards creaking overhead. Then silence. When the father climbed up, the boy was gone. They found him in the yard, barefoot in the frost, drawing circles in the dirt with both hands. "They told me you'd try," he said. The father's anger cracked. "It's not them, it's you!" he shouted. The boy tilted his head, listening to nothing. Then he answered with words that were not his own. "We are the same." The mother pulled the little one back from the doorway. The boy stood, ash smeared across his face like war paint. His smile was faint, his eyes unfocused. "They said tonight someone must bleed." And he turned toward his sister. Word of the boy's decline finally reached town. The father had resisted for weeks, ashamed and afraid. But now he sent for a doctor. The man arrived at dusk, coat damp from the ride, medical bag clutched tight. The neighbors didn't follow. No one wanted to set foot near the cabin. Inside, the doctor found a house marked in soot. Ash lines streaked the floor, bowls of water in corners, knives laid in strange patterns. The family sat tense around the boy, who crouched by the door, tracing the latch with his finger. The doctor crouched low, voice calm. "Son, can you tell me what you see?" The boy's lips parted, his voice flat. "They stand behind you. Don't turn." The doctor swallowed hard, but didn't look back. Instead, he checked the boy's eyes, pupils blown wide, lids swollen from sleeplessness. His skin was fever-hot, his hands trembling. He asked questions. Did others in the family hear voices? The father stared at the floor. The mother whispered that once, long ago, her brother had heard the same things. She said her grandmother spoke of shadows that followed her, but none of them had fallen this far. The doctor nodded grimly. "Hallucinations," he said. "Degeneration from the bloodline." He spoke softly, but the words landed like stones. "Inbreeding makes it worse with each generation. I've seen it in mountain families before, but never a case this strong." The boy lifted his head sharply. His voice deepened, strange and layered. "We're not sick. We're chosen." The doctor flinched. The mother cried out. The boy pressed his bloody fingertip to the ash on the doorframe, smearing it into the wood. They don't want your medicine, he whispered. They want me. The lamp sputtered. A knock shuddered through the wall, as if on cue. 3 slow, 2 quick, 3 slow. The doctor rose, shaken. I can't help him, he said. This runs in the blood, and tonight, it runs too deep. The father grabbed his arm. You'll stay. But the doctor shook free. He left his bag behind and fled into the dark. The boy watched the door close. Then he smiled faintly. They said he'd run. And the knocks came again, faster now, rattling the cabin from all sides. The walls shook with knocks, with 3 slow, 2 quick, 3 slow again, faster, louder, circling the cabin until the lamp guttered and the ash lines crumbled under the draft. The mother clutched the little girl, rocking, whispering prayers. The father braced the door with his shoulder, knuckles white on the latch. The boy stood in the center of the room, ash streaked across his face, eyes wide and unblinking. He raised his arms. It's time, he whispered. His father shouted, No more. He lifted the poker, ready to smash through the lines drawn on the floor. But the boy's voice deepened, 2 tones at once. Break them, and it takes her first. His gaze shifted to his sister. The mother screamed, clutching the girl tighter. The father froze. The knock spread to the rafters, then the floor beneath their feet. The sound became everywhere at once. The boy dropped to his knees, pressing both palms flat on the boards. His lips moved in a frantic whisper, Not her! Take me! Take me! He convulsed, body shaking, head thrown back. Foam gathered at his mouth, his chest heaving as though something pulled from inside. His family watched in horror, too afraid to touch him, too afraid to pull him back. Then, just as suddenly, the sound stopped. The boy collapsed onto the floorboards, motionless. The room went silent, but for the hiss of the dying lamp. His mother crawled forward, shaking him, calling his name. His eyes opened once, glassy and unfocused. He smiled faintly. It worked, he whispered. For now. Then he went still. The father pressed his ear to the boy's chest, but no breath came. The mother wailed, holding him close. The little girl hid her face against her mother's skirt, too terrified to look. Outside, the night lay silent. No knocks, no whispers, only the cabin, marked with soot, its furniture in a crooked circle around a fire gone cold. In the morning, the neighbors found the family sitting in the ashes of their home. The boy lay wrapped in a quilt, eyes closed as though only asleep. They buried him at the edge of the cornfield, near the animals. The mother marked the grave with a thin line of ash. The father did not stop her, and the neighbors carried the story with them, of a boy in the hollow who whispered to walls, who made rules of ash and blood, and who traded his breath so the rest of them might last one more night. No one spoke his name again. But when knocks sounded on cabins deep in the ridge, families drew their own lines across their doors, just in case.